it's just like a nightmare that's real. It's a real nightmare. I'm awake the whole time, and there's nothing but trouble. We're going to get into why, but here's a little audio depiction of what's going on. So I don't understand it any more than you will, but I completely do. Here's Let's Start Green Crush today.
That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to scare anybody.
Oh, there seems to be a problem. There seems to be a problem. That's all about nightmares. Let's do it again. We're alone in here today. Let's try one more time.
Hello, Alan. I've been waiting for you.
Alan, you're having a nightmare.
That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to scare anybody.
Don't you understand? You're a machine, Alan, a mechanical device. Is that straight enough for you?
I read you loud and clear.
Alan, you idiot.
Wanted to put some extra sauce into firing up today's crush. Today's crush brought to you by things that go wrong in your life. Things that go wrong in your life brought to you by people involved in your life. People involved in your life. Not always what you think they are. All right, well, hey, we are back with Green Crush, and it's a solo effort pretty much today. We have Russell, and we don't have a lot of tech helping us out today. Russell is here, and thanks for coming in, Russell. Russell is a student, and he works here also at a very much at what he's learning how to do later on in life, and hopefully more people will get into this broadcasting game, because sometimes you have to listen instead of watch. I know some people are watching now, but this is a podcast designed for listening, and it's designed for listening. Why would I be going to see the Premier of Ontario last night? We will get into that face-to-face question and answer session with the woman who is trying to usher in a very extremely flawed proposal. But if you know her history, that's not really out of character. We have on the show today a guest. We are able to bring in all kinds of fantastic people that want to talk about their advancements in the field of cannabis development. And we have a gentleman who is he's the head of a company that puts together off-the-grid living kind of situation. He's also, I don't want to blow the whole story here, but he's also he deals with cannabis in a lifestyle capacity, and he is completely knowledgeable on the health aspects, on the economic improvement aspects, on the sustainability thereof, of using cannabis as a food and as a way of life and as a medicine. And I know that more people hear this in this show, they go, come on, it can't be that good for everything. And it's not that you can't believe that because you've been told that it doesn't do all those things. You've been told nothing really can do all of the things that cannabis used to do before it was taken off the market and out of the food chain. So we're going to talk to this gentleman. He also makes his own edible items. I'm not getting too specific because I want to save the entire revelation for our guest himself. He's got a fantastic way of living, and he's got a fascinating mindset that can tell us all about how to get off of the grid, both the socio-economic, political grid that everyone seems to be locked into, and try to live their normal lives their normal way. This guy's a pioneer, and it's very exciting for us to bring him on today, other than the fact that yesterday he had to cancel. He had to cancel his appearance on this show as have a couple of other guests. I haven't really tipped my hand on this before. But the reason that our guest is not coming today is because his lawyers, and they are a group of people that go to school for a long time, like our friend Harrison, his lawyers have advised that it's not wise to come on the show and promote what it is that he has that's so fantastic. There's a perception out there that talking about this topic, these medicines, this substance that is being completely buried, the factual positivity of it is being completely buried at great risk to a lot of people's health. And the problem with that is it's criminal. The people that are doing this have an incredible plan, and we are finding out more about this incredible plan as it inches closer to some kind of vote in the legislature of Ontario and in the House of Commons in Canada. Of course, we always have to pass through several layers of legislative readings, and then they evidently take some kind of vote on it, whether or not they need to change some of the aspects of the bill. And if they do, it may move forward. There need to be 3 readings of this type when you're doing this kind of legislation, creating the law, bringing the proposed law that in this case needs bloody well all kinds of fix-ups. I mean, it's ridiculous. But you need to bring this proposed law into order. So when they decide, okay, well, the proposed law seems to be okay, but to appease one or two of the groups, we'll tinker here, tinker there, they hardly ever get it right. They usually cause a lot of upset at some point. Vis-a-vis King Street downtown, apparently can't move on it anymore without getting a ticket. I don't know the specifics of that, but they're ticketing people for having cars in that area. I'm not exactly sure where this is going. But Kathleen Wynne, the leader of Ontario, as many call her, myself not included, but she did hold a town hall yesterday, and I was happy to go to that town hall because I had just found out that my guest for today that we've been excited about for weeks and got the okay call yesterday, and then some hours later got the no-K call, couldn't make it. And I was kind of upset about things because I'm getting frustrated that we have to do this all by ourselves down here at Green Crush. This could sound like a plea for money. You wouldn't be too far off the mark if that were the case. But I'm just trying to have wrap my head around how it is that we are getting such positive feedback about this guy saying what's the truth. I can't believe he's doing this. I can't believe he's saying all these things. This is great. This is the kind of feedback we're getting. I'm sure there's a lot of people that hate it, but they haven't written in. It's only the fans saying, boy, this is great work you're doing and bringing this news to people, and I'm getting inspirational letters from folks based on radio shows elsewhere that I've been on. Coast to Coast AM with George Noory, guest host Richard Serrett, who got me on there in the first place, courtesy of this gentleman who's a fantastic broadcaster himself, Richard Serrett. I blame him for my overload of email that I've been getting primarily from Americans. Thanks for listening. And I've been trying to get back to these people, but a very small percentage of people contacting you from the overall 3 million listeners to that station. That's a lot of email for me to get through, and I've been doing it because I know what I'm talking about, and I've been happy to in this limited field, not across the board, but in this limited field, I've been trying to tell people, and I've been offering that help. I've been teaching people how they can, if they find out that they get the same kind of terrible stage 4 cancer or some other malady, some other issue, an immune disease perhaps cerebral palsy, perhaps autism. I can't even think of one illness that I've heard of that hasn't gotten some kind of remedy, some kind of improvement from using cannabis. And I can't believe I'm sitting here giving out this information, getting patted on the back by people who are thanking me and saying, hey, I heard about your show. I heard about your story from a friend, and I decided to check it out because the current options that I was undergoing is what I'm hearing for a lot of people. This is like a paraphrased response to a lot of the feedback that I get from offering this information, trying to collate it and keep it tight in this episode 19 best I can. And they thank me. And you can't believe, we'll start putting up a couple of sample letters, names not included, of course, just to give you an idea of a lot of the improvement in people's lives. A lot of happy folks understanding that the laws are actually quashing their rights and are themselves inherently illegal. Proffered by a regime that chooses to ignore the scientific data that I've been talking about on this show for quite some time. A 16-year-old article in The Guardian explaining how the British government at that time, in 2001, by then, they had decided, yeah, it's not anecdotal anymore. We've heard enough about the anecdotes. Now we decided to research it, and they found out that there was indeed quite an efficacious punch in the face to these cancer attacks using cannabis. And so why that didn't get developed, why these idiots are sitting here either not paying attention to the current ongoing news wave, and I say idiots because if you're one of these people that is going to insist, there's no evidence of this is all bullshit, this is not true, it's only anecdotal, you're dead wrong. And I do invite you to come down here and have a debate with me sometime on the air. I'd love to hear all about your side of the story and how everything I'm saying is bullshit. There's nothing that would help me out more than to be disabused of this notion that my stage 4 cancer that was guaranteed by an expert or two to take my life within a year is well behind me. I want to hear the person that can out-argue me on this. The floor is open. We've got a seat over here. You can take it. And you can explain to me how it is that I'm wrong about this stuff. Of course, they never come in because they don't want to be associated with the show or anything else. That's fine. I'll be a beacon. I am happy to do this for a while, but I really would like someone to come in here and explain to me how I'm wrong, and then I won't have to do this show anymore where I don't make any money because everybody's afraid to contribute to it or be identified with it, because although they're happy to hear it and it is a commodity in that aspect, apparently I have to just keep shelling out my own time and money to get this done. So you don't really hear this on public broadcasting television, this course, but if you do find a way to get to our page at Green Crush Pod on YouTube, on Facebook, or wherever it is, this is an investment of time and a labor of love, and we need to be able to continue doing this because I know that this is not a sustainable operation without some kind of operational funds. To keep the lights turned on, as a lot of people say. So I'm going to be all over the place today, and you can shit all over the Encyclopedia Britannica if you like for covering a lot of topics all at once. Please excuse the fact that our guest, who felt the pressure, and by the way, this is this particular guest, if he's listening today, we love you. We know all about it. We understand the whole thing. There's no problem with you. And not even the actual men who told you that you weren't able to come on. That's not a personal issue. I love this guy. I'm not going to mention who he is because I'm not going to bring, by way of association, the reason he doesn't want to come on the show. But we love him, and we'll see him again sometime. And we'll figure out a way to bring these truths, but apparently I'm the one-man wrecking ball right now. So I'd like to do a little something where we do a little commercial kind of thing. And I'm going to talk to you about a couple of notions. First of all, we do broadcast live every single Tuesday at 2:03 Eastern Standard Time, and we're always a little bit late. Unless I take a week off like I needed to last week, and we put out an audio-only episode 18. Also worth listening to. Happy that people are listening to the entire catalog and catching up and saying, when's the next one? So without being able to get into too much specificity, we're basically trying to do this every Tuesday. And I wish I could do it more than that, but this is already nuts. So, here we go with, let's get some music on here.
Barbaric stupidity and cruelty of government policy to act in a way of civil disobedience.
That is music to my ear. Okay, that is Paul Flynn. He is the MP in England in Parliament who explains that you need to break the law and you need to form civil disobedience, and it needs to happen now. So I'm so glad that I was able to speak yesterday at this surprise. To me, it was a surprise. They don't advertise these things very well, just like Justin and Bill Blair doing a cross-CanadaJustice.gov tour before to get the ideas and to understand where Canadians sit on this cannabis issue. And then, of course, they don't tell anybody where they were appearing and at which dates. And then, of course, the media shows up, does a little snippet, says they were in town last night to be cool and listen to the neighborhood, and primarily officers and off-duty officers make up the audience. So I was glad. Thank you, Kathleen Wynne, for facing the crowd. Now, just before I bring on this clip, I will say that several of the people there who were asked, who were able to find their way to ask questions in a random selection, I could verify that. They only maybe had one or two people that they wanted to say certain things, and everybody else was a bona fide question asker. And they wanted to know something, and to a man and woman, almost all of them thanked the Premier for coming and thanked her for being brave enough to come and have a town hall. And they took their hat off to her in that way. And then they would turn the gears and ask her a particularly challenging question vis-a-vis health care and some of the errors there. Vis-a-vis the student strike that was just recently poorly handled by all reports. Now, I don't know much about that, but an Ontario strike of universities and or colleges, I'm so sorry, folks, I don't know, I wasn't up on that story. But basically, it wasn't handled well. The students will agree with that. And most of them had to say, thank you for coming here, Premier, and thank you for being so brave as to come here. And while that sounded like a compliment to a lot of people and even earned some applause from some of the fans on board, I kind of look at things the other way, and I think if you have to praise the leader for braving the onslaught that everybody knows is going to be, hey, you're doing this wrong, hey, you're doing that wrong, if she has to be congratulated, or if it's a he, if he, whoever the Premier is, has to be congratulated for showing up and showing bravery, maybe they're just not getting it right most of the time. They shouldn't have to be complimented for showing up. And, oh, it's so brave of you to stand in front of your alleged constituents to try to untangle some of the nonsense that we've all heard you talk about. So that's kind of a strange one for me. But just before we get to Kathleen on this show, on this podcast, let's bring up some music. And I want to say, I realize a lot of people can't help us with money. They can't help us with time. That's okay. We will charge ahead until I can't. But if you go to iTunes and you look us up there and you want to download the show and the shows and go back in the catalog the way cool podcast listeners often do, we are on iTunes, Green Crush with Alan Park. Go in there, find the show, and it would very much help out, I think. And I'm not even asking for money on this particular aspect, although I certainly was earlier. I'm not above the means of exchange like everybody else who makes all kinds of money in this business. I can't believe if I had a chipmunk that I thought sang a pretty good version of some top 40 song that I could get a Kickstarter going or Indiegogo, and I could probably raise $15,000 or $20,000 for a singing chipmunk and all kinds of other superfluous garbage that seems to be clouding up that means of income and support. Then you find out if you're involved in any kind of cannabis issue whatsoever, you go on Kickstarter, they're not even going to pay you out. So there seems to be no avenue of finance to move forward. So I'm happy to ask you, please go to iTunes. Please help us build this show from the grassroots up. And yeah, that's a pun. So that's that commercial. Pretty cool, eh? I'm going to be making my own commercials. We'll just throw a regular one in there so you don't have to listen to it like this. But while we're on that note, hey, it's the Truth Seeker app. I'm going to throw a shout out to those guys at Truth Seeker. Look them up. They have an app, and they're happy to be on board with what kinds of information I'm bringing forth on this show, because they're truth seekers. Don't have a lot of mainstream network shows on there. Let's not jump to the old fake news thing, because I'm tired of that. It's been fake news since the beginning. The very beginning of news is under the auspices of Operation Mockingbird. Look it up. They say it's a program a long time ago the CIA had, and of course there's no published termination date of said program. So since that's the case, Truth Seeker app is out there collating all kinds of shows like this one and others. They're not all cannabis. It's about anything that's bullshit that they're trying to pull the covers off. Because that's what this is about. This show is definitely about pulling the covers off of bullshit. And so what better time then to segue over to our clip last night. Let me set this up a little bit. So Kathleen Wynne, Premier of Ontario, coming in, some say, including the gal who was hosting the thing. She was the mediator, had to tell all the people in the audience what was going to go on, and then try to keep everyone to time. She did a pretty good job, I think. Thanks for that. She kept everybody on point. Good job. And so I was thrilled to get sat down by their staff in the second row, just about 12 or 14 feet south of where the Premier was standing. And she kept sweeping around the room. I was sitting beside some people with protest signs and a camera, and I didn't really think I was going to get picked on because she didn't even want to look at that direction. So I moved over, and I came up with an idea to get her attention, to guarantee this question, or boy, oh boy, would it have ever been a wasted time for me. So here we're going to play that clip now, and Russell, if you don't mind, we're going to run this thing pretty much straight through. If I catch something outrageous, I'll ask you to stop. But here we are last night, Toronto, Premier of Ontario, and she did already field some juicy questions. They built some aquifer ruining wind turbines that were inefficient, and the gentleman there was explaining, the questioner, this very upset man, and with every right to be. He was explaining how in his community they have very clean, clear, pristine water up in northern Ontario. I didn't catch the town. And then they had to fight these turbines that were coming in because this gentleman had taken the time to do the research that the fucking government should have already done in the first place to find out that where they wanted to put these turbines was going to churn up all kinds of garbage and ruin their water supply. They fought it. They lost. They put the turbines in, and the water supply got fucked up. Go figure. Why don't you go be the Premier of Michigan in the Flint and Detroit River incident for profit? But they tried to fight this. Now this guy is being sued by the government's lawyers for $16,000 because he was saying and doing things that were trying to prevent them from fucking up his water. So I almost left at that point because I thought, I don't know if I can bring it compared to this guy. He is plugged in and wired, and he's got an excellent point. So did the students. So did the gentleman who errantly had a piece of his foot cut off in the Ontario hospital system. I can imagine he was more upset than I. But then later on, I realized, no, I'm still good to go with my fury. I get that I have defeated a system of bullshit and lies using an illicit substance, which I'm happy if you contact me to provide a means for you to figure out where to get it yourself. Notice I'm not saying where to buy it or if I sell it, because I don't. Are you kidding me? I would never set myself up in that way. Much too much on top of the legal machinations to make that mistake. Although I do claim that I do use it because I do use it. So Kathleen Wynne was there. The questions were flying. They were running out of time. I came up with a ploy to get her attention. It was effective. And so, Russell, let's just roll that clip from last night.
Okay, so I'm going to go.
It's a bit loud.
I'm going to go. Oh, I promised you, didn't I? Yes.
Yeah, you did.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I wanted to get the Premier's attention because there's been a lot of attacks, not attacks, but telling about the healthcare system in Ontario. And I have a happy story. I've lived in BC. I can compare. Perhaps some of you recognize me from CBC smash television hit Royal Canadian Air Force, where for 10 or 12 years, I used to make fun of people like you and the former Premier and the Prime Minister and Jean Chrétien and all those people, and you remember. And then I had to stop because on November 20th, this very day, 2013, I was so ill-equipped to function in this society, I was able to get to Mount Sinai, where I was picking up one of those things they call a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, where it had already metastasized into much of my skeletal structure. I had 2 liters of urine packed inside. I didn't know that because I was so immobile I couldn't even slosh it around. When I finally saw the expert doctor at the end of the month of December, because when you're diagnosed at the 20th of November, they get right on that. So between Christmas and New Year's Eve, the expert said, "I'm so sorry, you're so far gone, chemotherapy is not an option for you. You're just too far gone." And I can back this up with the documentation that I have here. Also, radiation was beyond my grasp, and so was any kind of surgery. They wanted to get me on a hormone suppressant. This slows down the testosterone, which is the fuel for the cancer. So without an option whatsoever, I synthesized in my Scarborough kitchen cannabis oil that I hear constantly from your health board about how it doesn't work. This is the 3rd anniversary of my funeral, everybody, so thanks for coming. I always wondered what it would be like to die and then have everyone at your funeral, and this is to the date. And so what I'm saying to you is that these folks with the questions and the students and the stresses that you're having and all of these different remedies that can come from cannabis oil, that your government and a lot of others, I know you're following in tow, have decided to scientifically repress data that I have here with me, that I talk about now on my show, that I get to talk about 3 years after my death, called Green Crush on YouTube. Look it up, Green Crush everywhere. It's a downloading app. And I am telling you that this pending legislation of cannabis is so greatly flawed, far more than the vape law that you guys laid on us 2 years ago and rescinded the next day based on the fact that it was somehow or other impractical to carry out. And I'm not even done counting the impracticalities of your current legislation, that of Justin and Bill Blair. We don't need to go to the cops right away. We need to go to the people that were supposed to be dead, know how it works, and stop telling kids, "Oh, we need to educate you," only on the bad side. Well, listen, if anybody puts salt on their food, take it easy, hypertension, ruin your meal, but you put too much on, you used it wrong. When you use it properly, it's delicious. So the question is, will you consider that since your proposed legislation, sheepishly brought forward by your 3 top ministers, like they were trying to get away with something, will you consider some different kinds of input from people that have been through this impossible cure? Because this stuff is against the law. What you're doing to prevent access and not using science.
Let me just,
thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
And
we're
that's a
very
great
glad
anniversary
you're here.
for me. Thank you.
Congratulations. So I will just say to this, because you rightly recognize that there is a federal component to this, and there are federal parameters around the legalization of cannabis. We will continue to work with the federal government. There are a whole lot of issues around edibles and all of that that have not been resolved. So we are going to continue. This discussion will continue to evolve. But we are going to stick with the rollout that we've got now. And we'll work with the federal government. Okay. Thank you for your
one
last
thank
quick
you, Russell.
question.
One more. Thank you very much. And there was one more question after that as well. And are we good for levels? Everything sounds good. Okay. Running live, folks. Going live. So that was me attending the premiere, and of course, a lot of people came and talked to me afterwards. I think we have a guest on the show soon because of that. And I was able to meet a few people who wouldn't let me leave the room in time. They did want to talk to me, including a reporter for a national broadcaster who was very fascinated. He's interested in what I was talking about. They shot a lot of footage of my reaction to Kathleen being there, and he told me to watch the news last night. None of that was on the news. The story was that the premier had bravely done a town hall in front of the citizens to talk about various topics. That was the narrative of the news pieces that the media had attended. And that was the tone of what they wanted to do, because the fact that the premier would hold a meeting and be brave enough to do it, and be brave enough to do this, that was the story. They didn't want to clutter up with the news of how a man in that jurisdiction has, quote unquote, illegally used an illicit substance to save his fucking life and then tell everybody about it. That's far less interesting, apparently, than the fact that this person participated in a public forum, of which there should be far more, and of which no one should need to have a compliment about them bravery facing that they need to do. They should be complimenting them on the fantastic job they're doing instead. But there weren't any plants in the audience, so that's not how it went. But there I was talking to the premier. I hope I'm on her radar now. I had been trying tweets for a long time, and eventually rude and offensive tweets, because the nice and polite ones were being ignored. And last night I cranked up a little salt and vinegar, and sometimes that's more effective at getting noticed than a caramel sweet sundae. So that's what I was doing last night. I live in this country. I live in this province. There's the premier, and I decided I needed to respond to this as a citizen.
The citizens respond to the challenges of the outside world and its geopolitical machinations. Say, this is news, Caleb, and we better do something about it.
So that's what I did. I went down there and spoke with Kathleen. So thanks, Kathleen. Thanks for paying attention long enough to register my opposition, which I am going to try to steamroll into an awareness cloud that just shows the stink of what's been proposed. Now, before I move on, I just also want to say I need to remind people that think, oh, well, cannabis is going to be legal next year. Pay more attention to that. Than it's far more complicated than this. In fact, several of our guests and a lot of people we're talking to think the best thing that could happen is for the entire legislation to drop because the government falls and they don't have time to finish legislating the thing. I mean, I wouldn't be against that at all. But in the meantime, understand that through this complicated series of machinations, if you will, again, to try to regulate this substance, we are looking at this proposal. There's so many things wrong with it, but here's a couple of things. They want to make sure that the children are safe. Oh, what about the children? We do have a tag for that, but I can't do everything by myself here today. What about the children? Oh, my goodness. What about the children where the children, when they're at home, need to be safe and at home, and the cannabis user who is going to be legally allowed to use cannabis under these stupid laws has to consume the cannabis in their house. They're not allowed to consume it anywhere else. They're not allowed to consume it on a patio even though people are walking around smoking cigarettes. They're not allowed to consume it even though they're extending and have extended and find reasons to extend the alcoholic consumption hours without bothering to track any kind of subsequent illnesses that spin out of those, including fights outside and ambulances running by and everything else. And you have to take your crummy, boring, probably pesticide. There's a lot of cases of this going on with there's like 7 licensed producers in this country either embroiled in right now or were embroiled in or could be later. But let's go with current and past. Large companies that are already profiting, and they are the ones who Kathleen Wynne is telling us we have to buy it from. So hang on to that thought, because not only is it bizarre that several of the provinces, and not all of them, way to go, Alberta, way to go and be on the forefront, Alberta. getting it together. First, Canada should have been way ahead of the States. Now Alberta is way ahead of Ontario in smarts of getting this thing done. I admit I didn't think that was going to happen. I thought they were going to buck down on that like all these other provinces, and don't even get me started on Quebec. But here's the basic plan. You got to bring that stuff home from a government-controlled store that may or may not have pesticides in it. And if it does, don't worry, you'll get a recall notice a year later, well after you've consumed it. That's what's already happened so far with this government-sanctioned system. So far, they're fucking it up all over the place. They're taking the skill set that people have, the compassionate folks that know how this works, that built this distribution of medicine model on the AIDS hospice kind of model to help people out back then with their AZT and cocktails, etc. They used the same model when they got legalized, when they started to distribute cannabis to ill people. That's working great. You have people that understand all the strains, all the terpenes, all of that. And instead they want to train people who kind of usually work at a beer store or a wine purveyor to all of a sudden get into this other topic of cannabis, which on the one hand they say, it's not like it's not like liquor at all. You can't consume it anywhere at all. You can't stay up late at all. There's no bars that have this at all. You can't go to a public place at all to consume this cannabis. But we're going to regulate it like alcohol. It's so repressive and so ridiculous and so poorly thought out. And damn you for presenting that in the first place. This pile of shit you call making sense doesn't make sense, particularly when this province and this leader can't account for $2.5 billion in infrastructure funds. Billion, did you say? Yeah, I said $2.5 billion. This is the same team of folks who can't account for $2.5 billion are also trying to tell us that they're going to tether the price of cannabis at just below what the black market charges, so the black market goes out of business. Good luck with that. And just not quite high enough to make this cannabis stuff seem like any kind of an interesting investment, any kind of worthwhile thing to spend time on. And they're going to be able to tether it at a certain place? That is ridiculous. They cannot even hang on to $2.5 billion of allocated funds here and there. You're not going to be able to pin it down. I mean, that's like tethering a stock price from both the top and bottom end to make it sit tight. Now, maybe there are purveyors of financial goods and instruments that are able to do that kind of thing, but governmental people are not able to do that kind of thing. And fuck me when the next budget comes around and the dollar tax per gram, so that's $454 a pound tax. Are you smelling that I'm leading this to a boycott? Oh, good. You're paying attention. So this tax, 454 grams, equals $454 of tax on the substance. You won't find a similar thing like that on alcohol. This is going to be something they can control to the point where the prices, I mean, that's just such bullshit. It's unbelievable. So that's not going to work, and it's ridiculous to assume that it might. And so therefore the proposal of legislation needs to be said no to, and they need to either strike it down or sit some of us folks at the table across from these police officers like Bill Blair. This guy was a city cop of Toronto, busted a lot of people. He's a fucking human rights abuser because in 2010 he was the leader, the chief of Toronto, and at that time he carried out the desire of the Ontario government. I don't believe Kathleen Wynne was the head at that time. I think she took over the reins from an on-fire Dalton McGuinty who had to run away from his scammery and the coal plant shutdowns and getting all that together. That's a whole other topic. But G20, Bill Blair, chief of police, making sure that people were getting arrested for a crime that doesn't exist on the books, that the cops told everybody they got to go away, and busted a bunch of people. They did kettling. Kettling is where you round up a certain area at Spadina and Queen. There were people all over the place, not just protesters, but shoppers, kids, people walking around buying things in a very thriving neighborhood. The cops kettled. That's when they physically surround everyone. And they held them. And they wouldn't let them go anywhere. and several of those people and many other people on the outside of the perimeter of the G20, where all these idiots get together and blow a ton of cash to figure out how to blow a ton of cash when they could just do it all by Skype and do it all without flying around in different countries and creating footprints of carbon that they then bitch at us we need to tighten our belts. So they could have just done that. But on top of that, this cop toddling around, making sure people are getting busted, putting them into a holding cell that was nothing more than a concrete floor with fencing, taking their clothes away, taking their medicines away. They sat there for hours, some of them, and most of them have sued, and most of them have earned money from that. And I'm sorry they had to go through that kind of discomfort from this guy that organized all of this. This police chief of Toronto, former police chief of Toronto, Bill Blair, who also doesn't answer any tweets, as he muscles through a pig-centric agenda of criminalizing something that this guy says he doesn't even partake of. He doesn't know shit. I want to sit down with all of the data that we do have now from Ireland and England and Italy and Spain, and that's just on the efficacy of the substance. Let's also include Israel. They never talked to Dr. Raphael Meshulam. Why is that? They're going to talk to some cop who says, well, we believe that what we should... Fuck your beliefs. Let's go with the facts. I'm sitting here because of facts, and I wouldn't be sitting here if your beliefs were true. So let's not have a human rights offender who put a lot of people in prison and no business to do it, who was never reprimanded, and is now ushering in a system of control on a substance he says is bad and he says is a bad idea, and everybody already working from it and with it is a criminal. So now they're going to get lost and we're going to control this thing. I mean, it's as blatant as that, folks. So don't get all excited about how, next year they're going to, that'll be good anyway. I guess people won't go to jail. They will. They've added 45 new laws. Our friend Harrison, the lawyer, was here and telling us about that before. We'll have him back on the show. My God. 45 new laws, many of them with a 14-year sentence on them. So before you get all excited, and I don't care if you're liberal or any other party, check this legislation proposal. Again, it's a proposal. Again, we don't always say yes to a proposal. Boycott this shit. I'm calling for a full boycott of Canada, weed, legalized weed. I'm calling for a boycott of the moratorium on being able to enjoy bud anywhere outside your house. Go outside and smoke it. Stand on the steps of the legislature and have a bong with you. Take your rights back. Don't let a guy who's abused more rights than all of us put together and kettled people illegally and put them in a prison holding cell in a former or yet-to-be film studio with cold and concrete floors where people were denied water, medicine, proper clothing. This is the fucking guy that's going to usher in how the rules are on this thing? No. And while that's as sickening as it is, let's trot in another large kind of fellow, Julian Fantino. This is a guy who also was a police chief of Ontario, also put people in jail for using cannabis, and now says, gee whiz, some people have shown him that it's quite effective as a medicine. So he's investing in this thing. He's profiting from this thing. And there's people right now with ruined lives because when they said, hey, no, this stuff's good, boom, the cuffs went on anyway. Boom, the time gets done anyway. Screwing up a lot of families, putting people in jail, and aren't most of them black. He's been called on it. He said, hey, listen, I gave a lot of people a break when I was illegally putting people in jail and fucking up their lives. Too bad for them. I'm going to make money from it now. That's the mindset of a person who doesn't use cannabis. That's the mindset of a greedy, authoritarian son of a bitch who needs to be called out. Before these people can roll around in the dollars commensurate with this wonderful new burgeoning economy, if they can take their bullshit clamps off of it, before that happens, we're going to need to see every one of these people that have been marginalized, had their lives ruined, had to do time, even if it was only in remand. I want a case-by-case study because there are, for sure, some blatant criminals that did a lot of bad things. that are in jail using and profiting from this cannabis substance. But if you do a case-by-case review, you will find that a lot of people have done time, will do time, were doing time, were having their lives ruined by a fucking pig who's now going to roll around in the money that he sees the light. Oh, yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah, well, we were saying it was good stuff a long time ago, fuckface, and we don't want to go to jail for it. But you put us there anyway. And now you're going to profit from it? Boycott Aleafia. This is a company called Aleafia, Aleafia. Boycott Aleafia products. Make sure Julian Fantino makes no profit from this until he has addressed each one of these cases, re-reviewed all of it, tough shit about how much it costs, spend the money anyway, find these dudes that your lives have been ruined by these oppressive laws, and in the G20 case, no law at all. And you compensate these folks. You figure out a way to get it done before you earn a nickel. Otherwise, boycott city, up and down Canada's boycott, up and down Ontario's boycott. And I'll say that because I live here. If you're in Quebec, I don't speak French. But maybe somebody bilingual listening can tell your premier. This whole series of laws they've got going in Quebec are even more cartoonish than the Ontario laws, and I'm not well versed on them yet, so I don't want to speak to it specifically. Maybe we can get someone on the show from the Quebec jurisdiction. But I thought those guys would be cool and on top of things. And boy, I don't always get it right, and that's one of those times. They really drop the ball on the freedom aspect of this cannabis substance. So we will talk about them, and we will talk about Alberta, and we will talk about all of the different jurisdictions as they begin to roll in what they feel are the best plans. And so far, Rachel Notley of the NDP government, the sort of left-leaning centrist party, has got some fascinating insight and different kinds of laws. I'm sure it's not all fantastic. But to this I say, Julian Fantino, Bill Blair, Justin Trudeau, I really want you to just take this substance and shove it up your ass. Because that's what this doctor says consuming weed is all about. It's safer and more potent than smoking it. So let's go to this story. It's in realcoolnation.com. Because mainstream folks don't carry this kind of stuff. And it isn't fake news, so fuck you if you think it is. Donald Trump and his administration are cracking down on marijuana and have called for states to retro back to the federal law, decriminalizing the controversial plant. Meanwhile, in Canada, one doctor is advocating for a weird use of the medicine. Dr. Mikhail Kogan is Canadian. We'll talk to this guy later, hopefully, or someone on his team. Mikhail Kogan, the Canadian, is saying that with the push toward legalizing the substance, even recreational use, he is beginning to advocate. And so this would be a proposal, Kathleen, similar to your proposal and Justin's proposal. I got a proposal. You take this substance and shove it up where the sun doesn't shine. And I mean nothing but good by saying that. Because he's advocating the consideration of the side effects of consuming cannabis. Well, you don't get lung cancer when you shove it up your ass, that's for sure. It says here that in spite of many studies indicating that THC, which is the part that gets you high, is different from CBDs, the part that helps with pain, and was illegally removed from the food chain about 80 years ago when they stopped feeding hemp to the animals, this doctor says that consuming the drug in some ways is better than others. What are you trying to say, Doc? Well, he's saying that everything he says has been debunked already when it comes to the smokable plant. What's surprising is that he isn't against the use of medicinal marijuana like many doctors, but instead says there's a better, less risky way to get the effects. His way does increase the absorption in many drugs. And, of course, that's the fella inserting the information that inserting this chemical substance known as cannabis into your butt, particularly if you have prostate cancer, because it's just sitting right there. You put that in your anus. That's the best method. So with love and compassion and science, I say to Julian Fantino, Aleafia, which we will temporarily ban until this guy gets his comeuppance and reckoning as a cop for putting people in jail first. We'll just leave that boycott on there. And in the meantime, Julian, And Bill Blair, and Justin Trudeau, and Kathleen Wynne, and everybody else getting in the way of truth to proffer their lies of control. Please try shoving this up your butt. It's more safe than smoking it. Yeah, he doesn't mean roll up a joint and put it in there. He's talking about suppositories. And it's a good thing because holding smoke in the bum would be hard. And yeah, it would be very hard. Although it would make an interesting mix of aromas if you think about it. He did mention that he thinks people smoke it because it's mostly the readily available option. And most people don't like sticking things in their rectum. But if a doctor told you to put chemo in your rectum, you'd do it right away. We already have many other forms in the United States, creams, edibles, and vapes machines in America. And is any of that viable? No one really knows if absorbing it through the rectal canal is better than smoking. But guess what? That's one way you don't have to share. Trust me. But what I do know is that the guys who said this are blowing a lot of smoke themselves. Maybe they just want to be creators of the next weed moneymaker. And it's possible that considering most doctors are vehemently opposed to using marijuana as a drug, because you'd hate to pick up the phone and tell the pharmaceutical company that keeps sending you golf clubs that you're using a plant that grows outside the window. But this is usually coming from their own doctor's personal beliefs. And to this I can attest, because doctor number one in my case said, that's ridiculous, don't do it. Despite the fact I was sliding off the face of the earth and then getting great improvement, recommended against my use of it. And but then the second guy actually said, yeah, this is great. Use whatever you want. So you have to find the right doctor. You have to get the second opinion. So basically what this doctor is saying that, there's a war on THC, and that's too bad. You can shove it up your hoop, and it's going to do lots of things there. I took the oil. I made the oil into little coconut butter balls, and I would pop those in there. And that was one way that I would take it and absorb it. And just be careful if you're going to do that, though. If you're going to wander around having done that. Sometime later, 40, 50 minutes, an hour, hour and a half maybe, you're going to experience anal leakage. And you'll want some kind of a Kleenex or a handkerchief, or in my case, unfortunately, a particularly snazzy shirt in the H&M change room that I thought I needed for something. But after that shirt became null and void. All right, so we're going to move over to a different segment now. This is a bit touchy, so I'm not going to go too deep into this. I've already been calling out elected leaders and telling them to insert things in one of their orifices, but for a good cause. Last week in this city, a drug overdose once again claimed the life of a drug squad officer. Hang on. There was a drug squad officer, and he died from a fentanyl overdose. Okay, so they were trying to explain that this gentleman has become addicted to fentanyl. Unfortunately, is no longer with us. I'm not even going to comment on that. I don't want to draw the ire of anyone that's friends and family with the particular officer. But to me, it sounds ridiculous on its face. Just the proposal that a drug squad cop who arrests people at dispensaries of cannabis has been involved in such things, was a fentanyl addict, and died from an overdose. No comment. Our prime minister is giving $21 million in our taxpayer money to the United Nations. Thanks, Justin. Apparently the United Nations needs that more than our badly underfunded military. And, when they couldn't buy those planes from the States for like 12 years and ratcheted up a $65 billion tab and still don't have a plane to show for it. Now the next move is to give $21 billion to the UN. He's got a giant corporate giveaway going on. It says here a privatization spree in Canada could cost regular people billions, erode democracy, which they're already doing with these oppressive cannabis laws, and undermine the fight against climate change. So that's a little bit out of my purview. But when Justin Trudeau is making these kinds of moves in various other arena. I don't trust him with the cannabis stuff either. You know, I don't trust him at all because it's time to talk about the Paradise Papers. The Paradise Papers recently unearthed that our revenue minister of Canada is marked in there as a guy stashing away lots of millions of dollars while he tells small business and the rest of Canadians to clamp on down and tighten your belt. As the revenue minister, Justin knows about it. Okay, here we go. Another guy who got fingered in the Paradise Papers, along with a lot of high rollers, including the Queen of England, who I hope is listening. I mean, what else are you going to do to one of your subjects? The Paradise Papers named Stephen Bronfman as a guy who's a little bit dirty and double dealing in some monetary things and scams that most of us are not able to even dream of. And I'm just going to put this in a bubble for you, and then we'll probably move on to another show another time. We'll slide on out of here real quick. But before I get to that, Justin Trudeau, Stephen Bronfman, he's the heir to the Seagram's alcohol industry. They made a lot of money, that family, running illegal alcohol at the time using gangsters down into Chicago, what they used to call gangsters, criminals. Remember Al Capone? Remember the booze? Remember the Prohibition? Well, you guys were still getting booze in the United States, and we were providing it. When I say we, I mean the Bronfman family. And they made a lot of money purveying alcohol and liquor into both dry areas and non-dry areas where there was alcohol. Oh, I think my ride's here. And here it comes. Fire truck, I guess. Yeah. So this Bronfman family made a lot of money at a time when alcohol and rum running was illegal, and they were doing it anyway. They were the criminals of the time, sort of the way the official government people call the purveyors of cannabis now criminals, to demonize them so they can take over the reins later. Because it's going to be how we prosecute now and how we prosecute later. Not it's illegal, now it's legal. This ruse that they're trying to play. And so, this particular substance, alcohol, this family, the Bronfman family, they sure did learn how to acquire it, make it, ship it illegally into the States. They were rum runners, gangsters. And so they really set up the infrastructure quite well because they were able to purvey alcohol when no one else was seemingly able to. This was like one of the major singular exporters from Canada, importers into the States, into Al Capone and those fellas, the Untouchables, Elliot Ness. They were trying to stop all of that. And these gangsters were getting away with it. And didn't they make a lot of money? And then didn't it become legalized? And all of a sudden, they're respectable, decent folks and at the head of a very vast financial empire, the Bronfman family. So what's interesting to me is that this fella, Stephen Bronfman, is also friends with Justin Trudeau. And there's a lot of investigative sniffing going around that this Justin Trudeau government passing this oppressive series of laws was funded into existence by this same Stephen Bronfman. So isn't it ironic that alcohol money might have powered an illegal government because they spent too much? This is the claim anyway. They're still looking into it. They spent too much money running and contravened electoral laws in Canada on how much your campaign can spend to get them into power. And then they got into power. And then they've been tinkering behind the scenes. And basically this Bronfman character has been going, look, this is how my family used to run rum. This is how we used to do it. Let's just sort of augment that template of control and slap it on top of cannabis world. Nice job, buddy. Well done. Too bad some of us know about it. So we're fighting the irony that while they're telling us cannabis is dangerous and the science says no to that, it's not dangerous at all, any more than table salt or chainsaws for sale. You have to learn how to use it properly because of the weakening education system and the removal of the study of logic. A lot of people don't see that. They don't realize it. They don't realize what these folks are doing. And I'm telling people about it. They're saying what a great job we're doing here, and we can't get any income. So I realize it's a bit of a pirate world. I'm up against something. I might as well be on a boat in the ocean broadcasting this show. Might have to go there eventually. Oh, here's a story in Civilized Life. Let's go to that. CivilizedLife.com says new report says Canada's cannabis industry will be dominated by big pharma, tobacco, and alcohol. No, no, and no. Fuck you. Get your own seeds. Make sure they're not Monsanto. Plant them on your own time. Take personal responsibility and tell these people to hit the fucking road. Big pharma, tobacco, and alcohol will dominate Canada's cannabis industry, according to the country's medical marijuana growers. Oh, these are the people with a lot of the folks with the diseases and the chemicals found in their batches, and then a year later they're going to do a recall. These are the folks, the big triad of pharmacopoeia, tobacco, and alcohol. They compare cannabis to those ways of control, of those methods of control on the one hand, but on the other hand, they demonize it and put it into places where you don't get to have it. Unlike alcohol, where you can sit on a patio in Toronto, even reservist, old school, old way, tight white Toronto, you can drink alcohol on a patio. You can smoke outside anywhere as long as you're 9 meters away from a door, which is evidently a number a lot of smokers don't realize. And Big Pharma, they're going to run the cannabis industry. According to a report from the consultancy firm EY, 75% of Canada's licensed producers, LPs, say those big players will essentially take over the market in the near future. Boycott national weed. Recognizing that there is substantial opportunity in the cannabis industry or securing it by illegal means, these established industries are expected to enter this space and try to leverage existing competencies and assets. Leverage existing competencies and assets. Yeah, like the people that knew what they were doing and compassionately doing it. They're just basically moving in where those folks were. This is gangsterism across the board. This is Al Capone 100%. They drew a comparison to the alcoholic beverage industry and the fact that there are craft brewers and players. Monica Chadha of EY told Business News Network. So a few big players, and then again, the industry will be comprised of smaller niche players that really won't be a major competitor because as soon as somebody comes up with a craft weed thing, the big guys are going to buy them up. Did you not see that with what was the name of that beer that was so great? Creemore. Wonderful little brewer. Fantastic beer at one time anyway. Then Molson owns it, and, that's it. So this is what's going to happen. They're going to roll out budgets every year with that $1 on the pound. $1 on the gram per pound and everything else. The dollar that they're trying to sell it at like 10 or 11 or 12 bucks a gram here. And then the new budget will come and then it's 13. Then the next budget and then it's 14.50. Just get your own plants. Grow your own plants. Get away from these people. Get 100% great seeds. They're available. You can find them. Grow your own shit. And tell these people to hit the fucking road. This is a corporate takeover. No thanks. No thanks. Not while you're denying what it really does, peppering it with pesticides, handing it over to Monsanto so they can rewire it so it doesn't provide the same efficacious thing. How could an industry like Big Pharma shit all over the notion of cannabis forever, lobby people in both the United States and the Canadian government to not have it available? All of a sudden it's available and they're going to run it. I mean, that doesn't smell like a big old dog link to you? I don't know what kind of means and needs you need to have to understand that, this is a game. And they are lying in so many different areas, it's almost impossible to keep up. Particularly in Ontario, where creeping privatization is putting Medicare at risk. So says Linda McQuaig, who's got a fantastic journalistic history. She wrote this on December 21 last year. I'm just going to read a couple of things here from it. The conclusion. Let's just jump to the conclusion. Expect to hear privatization advocates try to destroy the faith in our public system, pointing out that a dog can get a hip replacement faster in Canada than a human. While that may be true because vet care is private, and with enough money you can get whatever you want as soon as you want it. On the other hand, if an owner can't pay, the dog's put down. So let's stop with this series of lies. Let's bring people to the table to talk about what cannabis can do. Let's bring Dana Larson to the table, not Bill Blair. Let's bring Dr. Raphael Meshulam over. Let's fly him over from Israel. We're always promoting Israel over here in Canada and the States. Why can't we get one of their top researchers over here to shit all over this notion, this lie from these people that this cannabis is dangerous? Of course it's dangerous. Everything's dangerous. You break some glass the wrong way, you can cut a throat. I've been to Newcastle in England and seen a bar at 3 o'clock in the morning. I get it. You got to regulate things. You teach people how to use something. You don't educate them on the terrible side of it. Oh, my God. No one would have a saw or a hammer or a bag of nails to build a house if you use the same bullshit illogic on these tools for life that they're throwing on cannabis, now controlled by the drug industry and the alcohol industry and the tobacco industry. No wonder I can't get an LP to back me on this thing. Yeah, so this is a bit of a kick out. We had an LP. The folks there that came to us were nice. We talked to them, got everything set up. I'm doing the paperwork to fill out a particular role with this company where they were going to help promote the show and get the news out there that this stuff is so efficacious. Boom, the lawyers say, no, we're done. No, don't mention that. Don't be associated with an avenue of health regarding our product that we don't want people to know about. I mean, this whole thing is topsy-turvy, upside-down bullshit. I am so sick and tired of the lies. And I guess I'm only going to have so much time to kick this can, especially if I can't get help with it. But meanwhile, they're killing it in Ireland. We had Stephen Kelly on last week, who's with It Makes Sense, and they're working a bill through Parliament that's a lot better than ours. And that just went through. I just got a notice here recently that, how does it go? One moment, please. Right. This particular piece of news says that, here we go. This is from Vice Magazine. Going to get right to this on the old phonio here. Vice Magazine, this is just a relatively new thing, says these politicians are spreading new reefer madness myths. Quebec's public health minister thinks weed is laced with fentanyl and is scared her grandchildren will start eating cannabis plants. This person looks like an android on top of this thing. She's got a giant forehead. I don't know if you want to keep that going on while you're trying to sell this, because it's like an alien telling you can't have something that's good for you. She's literally saying she's scared her grandchildren will start eating the cannabis plants. Oh, my God. Let me get to this article. You're scared that people are eating cannabis plants, and my point to you is this is a food. You never would have gotten this far in your life without vitamin C. You never would have gotten this far in your life without vitamin B12 and enzymes and minerals taken in from plant matter. The government measures the healthful properties of spinach, kale, bananas, everything. Tell me now why it is you're afraid of eating this as a food when they're young. You idiot, you child, or you liar. Which is it? Take your pick, because here are the facts. There is evidence supported by many researchers that cannabis oil destroys cancer. Now, I'd not heard this before. He said sarcastically, having been this, I'm a fucking victor on this, okay? I was supposed to be dead. And I've played the angle where, gee whiz, I was in so much pain. That doesn't mean I want sympathy. That means I want to show you how bad it was and how healthy you can get. So excuse me if I get a little bit nuts with this sometimes. I get a lot angry sometimes. Right now I'm just playing that role. Here we go. It destroys cancer. It cures severe epilepsy. It treats muscle spasms caused by multiple sclerosis. And I know a buddy out there. Hey, Justin, hang in there, man. And the National Cancer Institute has admitted that cannabis oil kills cancer cells. Do you really need me to click that link when I don't have much time left in the show and have shot over my hour anyway? It's widely acknowledged that the natural compounds of the cannabis plant, that the use, sale, and possession is still illegal in many places of the United States and Canada and the world by these same punks that think they can dictate what the masses want, which is a complete, on its face, showing of democracy to the door while they sit around and go, how can we come up with more economic plans to boost Ontario's economy after we decide to clamp down on a burgeoning industry by omitting facts and stating lies? Widely acknowledged that the natural compounds of the cannabis plant, the use of sale and possession still illegal, can prevent, treat, and manage inflammation, neurodegenerative diseases, which I think you have to be a cop who then ushers in cannabis and thinks he knows what he's talking about. Wouldn't it be ironic that the only thing that could save Bill Blair's gray matter is a good old dose of cannabis to reverse what's obviously a neurodegenerative disease, such as multiple sclerosis, brain disorders like epilepsy, lifestyle-related issues, and diseases as diabetes and cancer. Hello, right over here, stage 4. Stage 5 now. I'm past that shit, and they won't take it away from you. So I'm going to want my parking pass, going to want my wheelchair parking pass. I'm still literally able to get that thing, although I physically don't need it. But if you're not going to take away that stage 4 branding, then I'm going to take all the perks that go with it. You can park anywhere in Toronto with one of those things. They can't tow you away. It's amazing. I'm going to get one. I'm eligible. Unless you rescind my stage 4, I am coming to get my free parking pass. Okay? Lifestyle-related diseases such as diabetes and cancer, chronic liver diseases such as cirrhosis. You know, from when you drink too much, you get cirrhosis, you get some cannabis in there and you can regrow and turn that shit around. How can you, on your face, take that notion that this stuff is so fantastic and helpful on the one hand, and you're going to lump it in with the folks that sell alcohol on the other? Meanwhile, experts have come forward to make a strong case for eating unheated raw cannabis. You stupid fool, you crazy person. You're worried about your children eating it. You should be worried that they don't. You should be worried that it's been vacuumed out of the food chain for about the last 80 years, and the animals that we used to enjoy, pigs, cows, chickens, that we used to eat far less often than is now promoted with fast food and the chemicals that are in them a long time ago, were far more healthy for you than when they removed the cannabis, replaced it with corn and soy for food, and starved this out of the CBD chain. And there's your arc of cancer on a graph. As soon as they took that out in the late 30s, now the animals aren't eating it. They put them on corn and soy and oats and other kind of feed, and then they started genetically modifying that. We eat that shit almost every day. We need to put cannabis back into the ground, back into the fields, hemp as well, almost identically similar to it with a far less THC capacity. And got a gentleman called me from Idaho, says he's 70 years old, couldn't take the THC aspect, decided instead to use hemp because he was thinking, and he's okay now. Took longer, for sure, but it did the same work. Dr. William Courtney, California-based physician and a dietary raw cannabis specialist. Can we get Dr. William Courtney from California on the show? Says we are actually walking away from 99% of the benefits that cannabis provides when we cook or smoke cannabis, explaining in its raw form the cannabis plant contains both THCA, which is tetrahydral cannabinolic acid, God, that's a tongue twister, and CBDA, which is cannabidiolic acid, the two cannabinoids known for their medicinal benefits, each of which must be heated in order to produce THC and CBD, respectively. Only when you decarboxylate, which means heating it up, and we'll get into that later, you have to heat it up to change the THCA to THC. When you decarbonate it, turning it into THC, it does cause psychoactive effects, or the high, associated with smoking cannabis. And of course, when you're doing the oil, you're doing a very tiny dose and building up a tolerance. Additionally, the body is able to tolerate larger doses of cannabinoids when cannabis is consumed in raw form. It's a fucking food. This is because when you smoke cannabis, the THC actually acts as a CB1 receptor a receptor agonist, and your body can only absorb 10 milligrams at a time. That's why you start slowly. If you don't heat it, you can go up to 500 or 600 milligrams. Use the plant strictly as a dietary supplement by upping the antioxidant and neuroprotective levels, which come into play at hundreds of milligrams of CBDA and THCA. It is this dramatic increase in dose from 10 milligrams which is far more than 2 nanograms, which these idiots are going to try to pull us over for and give us a 14-year jail sentence. And that's going to be great. We're going to have to address the mobility issue later on when they pull over everyone with these bullshit tests and tell us a bunch of lies even further to profit the actual prison industry. When are we going to actually address the concerns of the patient? So we're going to get this doctor on the show or somebody that could talk about this. We are going to have to leave now. That's enough Green Crush for today. I'm all talked out because my guest couldn't come because the laws are bullshit, and I'm kind of sick and tired of it. But I will definitely stick to this as best I can for as long as I can. I am open to your help. You can get a hold of me at alancomic1@gmail.com. You can reach me at Green Crush Pod. We have Facebook pages. Just punch in what you need to get to the truth, which is basically my name, Alan Park, with Green Crush. Alan Park, Green Crush, cannabis. Do your homework. Figure out that we're being had by a bunch of running gangsters while they tell everybody else that they're a gangster. It really sucks. I really thought things were going to be a lot better than they were a long time ago. And even Kathleen Wynne said that last night. She said, when I was young, I used to go to school in the 60s, and I just thought things were going to be better than this. And I thought, gee whiz, we're finally on the same page. Only thing is, I'm not the one running things into the ground so similarly that you can complain like that. You can't be wistful about how things are all fucked up and be an author of them getting fucked up. So there's so many logic bubbles in here. It's so fun to play with, and I'm so glad you listen. And please go to iTunes and check us out. We're at 234 King Street West in Toronto every single Tuesday at 2:03, and we're always a little bit late. Can't seem to get past that. That's okay. I really love that people have been getting back and sharing their tales of success in the face of people saying that it can't be done. And good for you. Good on you. Be brave. Try. Assert your rights. Tell these people that are trafficking in fiction that they need to stop. This is a quick shout-out and appeal to several of our Christian listeners. Hey, hey, hey. What's he doing talking about religion? Why is he bringing religion into this? Primarily because, a lot of religious people. Yeah, a lot of religious people, a lot of Christians in particular, are fully aware that there are lies running. They call it the work of the devil. They say Satan is at hand, trying to obscure our ability to heal ourselves with a plant that gets spoken of and brought into existence on page 1 of the Bible, the same thing you're going to have to stick your hand on if you ever get arrested and stand in a courtroom. And when the judge says, do you swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth? Just take a minute and say, well, I'd sure like to, Your Honor. That's definitely my intention. Let me just flip this Bible open to page 1 and read this particular Genesis chapter 1, 11, 12. And then fast forward to Genesis chapter 1, verse 29 to make sure this is a real Bible. And in there you'll see how this God created all of these things, said it was good, and provided cannabis as a food because it's a plant and a seed, and they're for us to have, despite the fact that a bunch of idiots decided to dream up a bunch of laws to keep that away from us. I'm not going down in this corporatocracy as one of the slaves, and I'm not going down as somebody that's going to be told I can't use this plant outside my window to save my life. I'm not going to be told I can't tell other people how to do it also. I never tell them to do it. I always say, wow, that's a terrible piece of news you got there. Boy, if I were in that position, I'd do this. And that's how you'll never be able to tell me that I'm prescribing it. You'll never be able to bust me for proffering it and making money from it, because I don't, other than being able to save my life and keep on living and making money that way. So that's the show. Thanks for listening. Hoping to get some bonus episodes out. Check out episode 18. It's audio only. We did that elsewhere. Had to take a break from the studio. Christian people on top of it. And even if you don't agree with the Christians and you think it's all BS, they're still coming down on the side of freedom on this topic, at least. Not the really crazy ones that think it's the devil's weed. Those are the misinformed Christians. They don't seem to understand much. But the bona fide, genuine researchers of and feel they have it exactly nailed down. They get it. They understand that this is food. This is not a drug. This is not to be controlled or distributed by pharma. Fuck you, Shoppers Drug Mart. You're not in this. You've been fighting against this for years. Now you want to be a main purveyor? Jesus Christ, you people ought to be embarrassed. And I guess I offended some of the Christian listeners taking that name in vain. See, I'm all over the map, just like you say. This is Green Crush. I really want to thank you for listening. I really want to ask you to come back next week. We will be having guests. I'm going to pound the shit out of this thing as long as I can until I can't, and I hope I don't get to that place. Thanks for sending in cards and letters. And by that, I mean by emails. This is Green Crush. Come and find us. Come and eat something healthy. And I'll talk to you about how I took stage 4 cancer, stuffed my thumbs into its throat, imagined it as a physical opponent. The sneaky fucking thing of cancer that just comes creeping into your life and ruining it. I had to imagine that it was a physical opponent, that it was an enemy, instead of just being creeped out by this ever-present thing taking over my body. And I said, you're going down.